I'm very excited today to welcome Glenn Greenwald. He is the author of the forthcoming A Tragic Legacy, How a Good versus Evil Mentality Destroyed the Bush Presidency. It is out this month. You can, of course, check out his writings on a daily basis at salon.com. Well, also with us, Dr. Ron Daniels, president of the Institute of the Black World, 21st Century, and former executive director of the Center for Constitutional Rights, and Christy Hardin Smith, a former attorney, recovering attorney, and, of course, a blogger at the wildly successful firedoglake.com. Welcome to all of you. Now,
evening, Sam.
Hi, Christy. Thank
Hello.
you for joining us. Now, I want to start with you, Dr. Daniels. In light of the Bush administration now saying that our occupation of Iraq, it won't necessarily be permanent. It'll just be for a long time. Like,
Korea-like.
Korea-like. Is September still going to be the magic month where all the Republicans decide, well, it's not working out and we're going to really take an honest assessment this time? Or is it just another way of kicking the can down the road and bringing this past the election in 2008?
Well, frankly, I think the events are overtaking the Bush strategy. They're floating conflicting balloons, as you well know. One is this now story about the Korea model as a sort of a permanent long-term strategy, but also internally the conversations about troop reductions that might be as high as 30 or 40%. I think events on the ground are simply just overtaking this madness. I mean, there is just absolutely no connection between the surge. What's happening is there is a surge in casualties. I mean, I think there's 14 more American troops tragically killed in the last 48 hours. I think the Republicans are going to bail come September because things are not going to get better on the ground.
Glenn Greenwald, you wrote a piece just the other day basically listing all the times we've heard in the past that there's going to be this drawdown. Do you buy this, well, I guess David Sanger called it today, a concept for a plan B that would involve drawdown?
No, absolutely not. And not only is it the case that we've heard many times before from the media that the Bush administration has intended or intends to reduce the number of troops, all that is going to happen in September, the way they've set it up, is that General Petraeus is going to sort of descend upon Washington, and he's now the voice of unchallengeable authority, and he's going to unveil whether or not there is substantial progress in Iraq, and based upon what he says, then supposedly Republicans, if he says that there's no progress, will start to weaken in their support for the war. But of course he's not going to say that. He's going to say what he said before and what generals always say, which is that there is some progress. I need more time. He's already said the surge will require a great deal of time beyond September, and we'll be right back in the framework where if you want to withdraw the troops at that point, it means that you're denying the general the ability to achieve victory, and you're handing Al-Qaeda a defeat. And I think very little will change. And it certainly won't change with the person who matters most, which is the president. So I don't expect anything to happen different in September. Yeah, in fact, the ABC has reported that Petraeus is already predicting that he's going to see progress in September, which is fascinating because we heard that you can't tell that we're going to know about progress until September, but perhaps he has some type of clairvoyance, I guess. Christy Hardin Smith, let's talk a little bit about the Democrats' machinations in all of this. Some Democrats have argued that we have been able to change the didactic here, the conversation from stay the course to something has to be done. Give me your sense of whether or not when the magical month of September comes, are they going to shift their tactics? Are they going to take it to the next step?
Gosh, Sam, I hope so, because if the tactics are what we saw in the last month, we're all in big trouble.
Yeah,
I mean, honestly, that was just, it was a public relations nightmare just from a political standpoint. But from an effectiveness standpoint, they knew going into the vote that they didn't have the votes. The Blue Dog Democrats had cut a deal with the Bush administration. They knew that from the time that all of those folks went over to the White House and had a sit-down meeting with him in January and February in that early time frame that, they were going to have trouble having the votes on that particular issue. And they did the vote because you have to continue to put pressure on the administration. There was a hope that by having this vote occur, that people back home would start putting more pressure on elected officials who weren't voting for it. So, calling in, putting that pressure on that, as Dr. Daniels was talking about earlier, the events on the ground are really overtaking everything. But, I keep going back in my mind to how many American soldiers are going to have to be killed for George Bush's ego before the events on the ground have gotten so bad that even people in Washington realize that they have to start moving, that George Bush and the administration realize that they have to start moving. And, every day that we put that off is, another day that we've lost another. I mean, he's right. In the last 48 hours, it's been, 14 soldiers and counting.
Dr. Daniels, what do you make of that? If that was the strategy of the Democrats, that there would be enough pressure once they took that first vote and they sent it and George Bush vetoed it, that there would be maybe enough pressure brought by essentially the American public upon some of those blue dog Democrats. Is this also perhaps, maybe the events on the ground are overtaking the Bush administration's policy, but are the American people engaged enough in what is going on? I know that their polls show Americans are against the war, but is there enough passion there to force this war to end?
Well, see, I think the problem, is clarity about end game. Frankly, for whatever we want to say about it, there is a lack of clarity about the end game. But I don't think Petraeus, I don't care what Petraeus says, if he says there's progress in September, and we're seeing casualties like we're seeing them now. We're seeing stories in the newspaper about armor-piercing protection that ain't protecting the troops anymore, that the enemy is, or the people are adapting to it. I think you will have greater pressure building, and I think a part of that pressure is going to come from the Republican Party that is going to be frightened of completely getting washed out in the next election. But I think part of the problem is the polls may say the American people are against the war. The problem is, and I think the Dems are in a very precarious position because they do have the blue dogs in the middle of it, and frankly, they're still suffering from the Vietnam syndrome in terms of having been beaten over the head for, X numbers of years for being soft on war, having abandoned Vietnam, all those things. So you have all those issues in the cauldron, and that's why you have such unclarity and such weakness, frankly, in terms of the Democratic posture.